Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to Merryn Talks Money, the podcast in which people who know the markets explain the markets. I'm Merryn Somerset Webb. This week, we're bringing you a panel I hosted in Dubai last week. It was at the Heriot-Watt University campus, which is part of the Edinburgh Business School. With me on stage was Adam Dixon, Chair of Sustainable Capitalism at Panmure House, Ashley Hunter, founding partner of A Hunter Company, which is a global risk management advisory and consultant firm, and Iqbal Kham, CEO of Fajr Capital, which is an impact-driven investment firm. We spoke for nearly an hour about what Adam Smith might make of Donald Trump's tariff policies, about tax rules, about deregulation, and about whether passion should factor into your career planning. So for this week's episode, we're bringing an edited version of that conversation. And to keep the tradition alive, we started as we do at our Fringe shows, and the panelists chose a favorite Adam Smith quote to kick off the conversation. Here is my panel in Dubai, starting with Adam Dixon sharing his favorite Adam Smith quote.
The one problem about Smith quotes is that he wrote in the 18th century. And I don't know, I'm a native speaker, and I even find understanding Smith's writing to be difficult. So I'll try to read slowly. And my quote comes from The Theory of Moral Sentiments, not his more famous book, The Wealth of Nations. And my quote is, "The great body of the party are commonly intoxicated with the imaginary beauty of this ideal system of which they have no experience, but which has been represented to them in all the most dazzling colors in which the eloquence of their leaders could paint it."
Excellent. One of my favorite quotes. Why did you choose that quote?
So I chose this quote not to pick on Donald Trump. I will be very diplomatic in what I have to say, but given that we're, 2 or 3 weeks into the Trump presidency, every day is a new executive order that dismantles some part of the U.S. government, both domestically and internationally. There's threats of tariffs against Canada and Mexico, which, 24 hours after the fact are stopped. And everyone's thinking, what's going to happen next in the Trump show? It's quite entertaining. I don't know what Ashley thinks about it. But I thought, and again, this is not to critique Trump or to give an opinion on what is transpiring, but why I chose it is basically to set people at ease. I'm always shocked that people believe every single thing that Trump says. He's been president before. He said a lot of things. Does he believe everything he says? I don't think so. But you talk to people and they think, the United States is going to invade Greenland. And you think, really? It's not going to invade Greenland. I don't think so. The United States is going to leave NATO. No, it's not going to do that. And so I think I just wanted to, because Trump is so eloquent, he's so bombastic in his pronouncements on what he wants to do. And people believe it, this grandeur of make America great again. And actually, we should step back a bit and say, well, actually, does he believe everything he says? Maybe. But that we should also remember that, and this is what Smith was writing about, was he was very much a conservative in the sense of he did not like revolutions of the like that Trump is promising because he thinks they're disruptive in a bad way. And so I think we all need to look at Trump as being, yes, an interesting force, and some of the things he's doing will be disruptive, but we shouldn't necessarily believe everything that we're hearing.
It's also, one of the senses of this quote is that everyone believes that there is an ideal system under which one should live, but in fact, the most effective system is the muddled-through system that we all live in, the one where everyone does the best they can on any particular day, and we know from attempts to create idyllic lands that it doesn't work.
Yes, absolutely, and that's exactly the point. This man of system, as he calls it, this who offers the people this ideal system, is usually a charlatan.
Yeah, there is no ideal system.
No.
But I suppose the other question is, should we believe him more this time? Because this is his second term. He's not looking to be re-elected again, we hope. That this is a 4-year term, one and done. And that means that he might be prepared this time around. His government is better prepared. The systems around him are better. But also he may be prepared to follow through in a much more risk-friendly way to him than he might have been in his first term.
So 2 responses to that. 1, sometimes change is good. Sometimes disruption is good, right? So we shouldn't necessarily, and this is, again, I don't want to make give a position on whether I think something is good or bad, but just to say that change in any country, in any government is not necessarily a bad thing. So some of the changes that he and his administration want to make may be good. Obviously, that means some may be incredibly bad. The other point to mention is, and sorry for the lesson on American politics and American government, is that there in principle should be 3 co-equal branches of government. And the executive branch is not the most powerful. There's still the Congress and there's still the judiciary, And in principle, too, there's 50 states with, as well, decentralized forms of power. And this was also something that was very much discussed in the 18th century among the likes of Adam Smith. And just to say then that means that, yes, his administration might be prepared, but there's still Congress and there's still the judiciary. And if Congress goes along with it, well, then that's what the people voted for.
The first thing that pops into my head when you say we should have these 3 equal parts of government, and perhaps in the US sometimes, like now, maybe the executive has too much power. In the UK, we now are coming to the belief that the judiciary has far too much power, and that's a different type of problem. Ashley, I know you wanted to say something there. I could feel it.
You know what? Adam, to your point, I think that some disruptive behavior is good. I think when disruption becomes a vehicle from turning away from what is important, I think then it becomes a problem. So I think currently what we have is an administration that is trying to create chaos so that we don't realize all the trouble that we are about to encounter.
But Trump did say during the campaign that he didn't want to tax Americans that are living abroad.
No, don't be jumping any guns here.
I'm not jumping a gun, just foreshadowing some discussion.
Okay. But let me ask both of you then. Let me ask both of you, and Iqbal, if you have a thought here. You've talked about some change being good, some change being bad, some disruption being good. What are the things, because we're not a negative podcast, what are the things that are happening under this new administration that you might approve of? That you might say, well, this is good, this should happen.
I think he's very business. I think he's pro-business. And for someone who owns a business, who sold businesses, who likes business, I think he has created an air of we're open for business. And I think that means that we're going to have less regulation. I think that means that we're going to have less hoops to jump through. I think M&A will actually start to pick up again, which we did not have under the past administration. So to be quite honest with you, yes, as far as business is concerned, right now, I'm optimistic.
Okay, but what about, here's another one of my favorite quotes I'm just going to chuck right at you here, okay? By means of glasses, hotbeds and hot walls, very good grapes can be raised in Scotland. That's not actually true, by the way, but it's part of it. And very good wine, too, can be made of them at about 30 times the expense for which at least equally good can be bought from foreign countries. Would it be a reasonable law to prohibit the importation of all foreign wines merely to encourage the making of claret and burgundy in Scotland? So that's Adam Smith's view on tariffs. Very bad thing.
What? Okay. I am not a protectionist. I think if it makes more sense to get it somewhere else for cheaper. I mean, there are a lot of women right now who are going to be very upset that they're not getting their Shein and Temu. Okay.
You'll need to explain that. Not everybody will understand that reference.
So in America, there are 2 very dominant, low-cost e-commerce, and women in America on TikTok, which is another thing that we love. They do their Shein hauls, where you can effectively buy a month's worth of clothing for about $5. And now the United States Postal Service has now decided that they're no longer going to accept shipments from China or Hong Kong, which basically means that all of the Shein and Temu hauls that are happening on TikTok, which my husband can attest to, takes up the majority of my evening. it is going to go considerably down now that this is no longer available.
Now, this is related to, it's related to the removal of an exemption for duty paid on packages coming into the US worth under $800,
Yes.
right?
And along with the fact that they're just in this tariff war. I mean, he left the tariffs on China. That is not going to make them happy. They're looking for all ways to disrupt any company doing business there. Google, Apple, they're all now being
But the Chinese stock market has reacted very happily to these tariffs being lower than expected.
Oh,
So, it's all about expectation management, right?
You have to manage your expectations, but I think to some degree this is not going to end well for anybody in the U.S. because we actually source so many of our goods from Chinese manufacturers. I mean, all of Trump's merch comes from China.
True. But okay, well, let's look at it like this. Let me ask Adam then. I mean, the reason that he wants to do this is because of the hollowing out of the manufacturing base in the US, which is a very bad thing in lots of ways because it removes high-quality, high-income jobs from the US, and also it's a national security problem at a time of geopolitical difficulty. So there are strong reasons to think that one should try and encourage not necessarily the making of more burgundy in the US, but certainly the building of new manufacturing plants that could enhance incomes in the US and also provide national security over the long term. So in that sense, could you argue with a small tariff on stuff coming from China?
So, I mean, what you've highlighted, though, is there's a schism in the Republican Party. And there's the, say, free trade, Wall Street Journal reading crowd. And then there's the more nationalist wing of the party. And I think that schism is something to watch because this is where Trump's tariffs will be fought out. It's interesting, though, that what happened with Mexico and Canada just over the last 24 hours is that threatened tariffs and then actually we're going to pause them, right? So this is much of it is a negotiating tactic. On China, again, the tariffs aren't as high as they expected because, again, will Trump be able to rebuild the American manufacturing classes when Elon Musk is automating production and manufacture and we have...
So maybe we just don't need the manufacturing classes, but we need the manufacturing plants.
I want to say that Montesquieu, when he talked about separation of powers, legislature, executive, judiciary, as the way to run a government, we have a fourth class of power and influence, which is the multi-billionaire class called Elon Musk. And he is trying to completely destroy the American civil service, and he has a view on everything. And this tariffs are very inflationary. We have seen this script play out before. And as far as Mr. Trump is concerned, second-term Trump has been waiting for a long time to come up with policies. And second-term U.S. presidents are hardly accountable. There are those who think about their legacy, and there are those who think about themselves. I think Mr. Trump is in the later category, where he has to, everything has a Trump perspective. His perspective, his family's perspective. And I think this will be very inflationary for the world because he's singularly responsible for deglobalizing the world economy. And we will all pay the price that inflation will come roaring back. And when inflation comes, it takes long time to come, but it takes longer to subdue it.
But doesn't it feel like we've already got that? I mean, certainly in the West, we have that hangover from COVID. It hasn't quite left us. Those pulses are still coming, and we can see it constantly in the wage numbers. I mean, we noticed the rather high wage numbers out of Japan this week. You know, we see it pulsing again and again.
Yeah, but I think, putting on tariffs and creating an environment where Trump is going to do this or that, whether he does it or not, it is destabilizing the world. And the deglobalization which is happening all across the world, majority-minority nations where the majority in every country feels that they are a minority. The world is being divided into them and us, which is not the outcome which we want. And I think it is leading to the world being destabilized. I mean, go to Africa. The impact of tariffs, the impact of inflation, the impact on currencies of the emerging market is huge. And I think this will all play out in the next 4 years. And remember that he has the control of the executive. He has the control of his cabinet, which he should as a president, but he also has control over the judiciary. So the separation of powers is kind of becoming very weak in America. In such an environment, it's easy to take wrong policies without much debate and make things worse for the world as a whole.
Okay, Iqbal, challenge for you. One positive of two-term Trump.
I think Trump is a doer. So it's better to take action than rather have inaction. We had 4 years of Biden's inaction. And as a result, economic policy, political, international peace all suffered. Whether you agree with Trump or not, he is a doer. And I think he will do things. If he gets majority of the things right, then he will have a positive impact.
Right, I think we're going to go on to our second quote. Ashley, can I move on to you?
Sure. Okay. The subjects of every state ought to contribute towards the support of the government as nearly as possible, in proportion to their respective abilities. That is, in proportion to the revenue which they respectively enjoy under the protection of the state. Obviously, I'm sure you can tell I'm American. And I am a little bitter because unlike many of my friends who are expats, they enjoy the ability to not pay taxes in their respective countries. However, as an American, the IRS follows me every year. They find me. And every year I send them money. And I don't live in the U.S. I do not enjoy the spoils of living on U.S. soil, yet I still pay to contribute to everyone else to enjoy the riches of my labor in the UAE.
But Ashley, don't you feel that what you're paying for is the right to hold an American passport? And there are an awful lot of people who would pay an awful lot to hold the passport that you have. And so paying that tax is simply the passport premium that you owe to the country that protects you.
One might say that. But there are a lot of other countries out here that offer up protections for a lot less than I pay for mine.
Well, maybe they're wrong. I mean, but it is a problem, isn't it? I mean, this idea that the tax you pay should be connected to the services one way or another that you receive. And of course there is a price for being a citizen. Of course there is a price for holding a passport to a country that allows you, I mean, America falls pretty high up when it comes to the passport index every year that tells you how many countries you can go to visa-free, for example. You know, it's near the top along with UK passports and a lot of other European ones, etc. So there's some value in that. But then you get to the point where you feel, as you do in a lot of countries at the moment, that you're paying an awful lot and not getting much back. I mean, the statistic that is always thrown around in the UK at the moment, everyone hates rich people in the UK at the moment. We hate rich people, which is why they're all coming to live here in Dubai. The top 1% of income taxpayers in the UK pay 28% of all income tax. They earn around 13% of all income. So we're no longer living with a progressive system. We're living with an ultra progressive system. And if you, of course, you get nothing for yours.
Zero.
How would you change that system?
I think we should have a global flat tax.
A global flat tax?
Yes.
At what level?
I haven't gotten there yet. I'll let Adam sort those details out. But I don't have an issue with tax. I just think that it should be distributed. There just needs to be a better job because obviously America does provide some level of comfort and security. And I'm sure others also enjoy that security and safety. So a global flat tax to me seems like a nice, healthy, middle ground.
Yeah, around 10% or so.
10, 7.
Okay,
I'm up to negotiate. I'm from America. Everything's for sale.
But in that sense, I mean, you're coming out more and more as a Trump supporter every second. In that, one thing that is happening in the US is that if he has his way with the American bureaucracy, and we were speaking earlier, weren't we, about US aid and the extraordinary things that American taxpayer money ends up being spent on. If he has his way with the bureaucracy, if he manages to reduce the costs of government very significantly, and he's talking about them being able to bring down tax rates very significantly, we'll be sitting here in 4 years and you'll be going, that Donald Trump, what a guy.
Perhaps. At this juncture, I do not see it. I think trying to unravel the United States federal government with all of its problems, it is a functioning, dysfunctional organization. And there is something inherently comfortable in the disorganization, because you at least know that every month Social Security checks will be sent out on a certain day, right? If you are on assistant living, you do realize that those payments will come every month. Is it functional? Absolutely not. Does the VA have holes? Are there issues? Yes. But there is something about having functional government and trying to dismantle it like it is a corporation. To me, I cannot see that happening. And I don't see it working. He can try. Now, I do stand behind his tax. That's it.
Okay. There is another very famous Adam Smith quote that refers to tax that I also like. The tax which each individual is bound to pay ought to be certain and not arbitrary. The time of payment, the manner of payment, the quantity to be paid ought all to be clear and plain to the contributor and to every other person. And I know that the tax code in the US is out of control. The tax code in the UK is completely out of control. We normally, when we talk about the tax code, we talk about it in terms of the works of Shakespeare. It is longer than the entirety of his production, but it's also, of course, significantly longer than The Wealth of Nations, which, and I do believe all of you who said you read it, but it is very, very long. The UK tax code is now longer than The Wealth of Nations, moral sentiments combined, times a couple of times, I'd say.
Oh, God.
So it no longer fits any Smith rules about tax. Now, you all have views on tax and how it should be charged and how it should be paid.
The thing about tax is this, it only goes up, whether it is VAT or personal taxation or corporate taxation. My view on taxation, I've been a resident of the United Kingdom, and I've paid taxes over a long period of time, is that my money goes for good causes. It doesn't go for causes which I don't believe in it. And I pay taxes happily because it is helping those who are in need. But I think, actually, you could move to France and call yourself that you are an artist and you will get taxed at 0%.
Yes, or in Ireland. You could do that in Ireland as well.
Taxation is also a mechanism to attract people of talent to your country. And the French government, with all their bureaucracy, have done it very well. So I suggest that Ashley considers moving to France and giving her American nationality after 5 years.
Okay, no, I'm staying in the U.S. for any Americans listening.
I'm just curious to ask Iqbal a question about taxes here in the UAE. Europe is very high tax. The U.S. is a bit lower than Europe and UK, but it's still high. Whereas here in the UAE and around the Gulf, generally, taxes are low to non-existent. At what point will Dubai have to start taxing?
Well, we do have taxation. We have VAT. And there are certain items which are exempted. And VAT across the GCC is increasing. And I think taxation in personal form will not happen for a very long time.
So Ashley will be okay.
I am okay. I am not being taxed in this lovely country.
Oh. Okay, but here's a question for you then, Adam. In the US, once AI has produced the most extraordinary productivity boom and changed everything, streamlined the bureaucracy of the country, and also reduced the cost of doing almost everything to nothing, we won't require tax in the US either. Or is there too much false promise in AI, do you think?
I don't know what to think about AI. I think there's a lot of hype around it. I think the very specific tasks will be automated, clerical work. So I think that the question, though, that you're wanting to get at is, will large swaths of the public not have jobs? And therefore, will we have to start thinking about things like a universal basic income or some kind of support? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'll be a very long time. And I think, like with other technological advances and changes, we've always found other things to do. And let's go back to what John Maynard Keynes called for. It said, wouldn't it be nice to have a 20-hour week? I mean,
it would be
you think
great
if we could work less but then be more productive? So I think, but I mean, the real question is productivity in America is very good and very high. What I'm really concerned about is productivity in old Europe and old UK, which is flatlined. This region of the world, there's lots of productivity and there's a lot of dynamism, which I think is useful to see. So I think that's the real kind of question is America will be fine for the most part. Ashley might not come back, but, we'll see.
So is there an AI bubble in the US? You said there's a lot of hype around it.
Well, I mean, what we saw recently with this DeepSeek and that kind of spooked the markets. And I still think there's probably money to be made, obviously, over the long term on those companies that have the data that can feed into AI models. But it's going to be the specific uses of AI and those companies that can take not the big, large language models, but the more specific ones and use them to do things like find the cure for cancer or solve some problem that we have. That's where I think money can be made.
We often get the question about what should I study at university with AI, all the jobs will be gone, et cetera, et cetera. And we always say the same thing. You cannot imagine the jobs of the future. We know they will come, but you cannot imagine them. And I saw that in action today on the beach here in Dubai 20 years ago. There is no way I would ever have believed for a second that anyone could make a living as an influencer. But here on the beach, endless people taking photographs of themselves, setting up little tripods and posing around the place, etc. And I said to the kids, what on earth are they doing? And, they're influencers. This is a career we couldn't have imagined 20 years ago. It's not one I strictly approve of, but how extraordinarily creative we are in the production of these jobs, right? Do you go out and see influencers all over the place?
Not really, but they do impact our businesses. We have food businesses. By which we use the influencers to bring more customers in. So there are some businesses where they do work very well.
Free food. Excellent.
So the quote which I have chosen is a very personal quote for me. It is from the Theory of Morals and Sentiment, 1759. For to what purpose is all the toil and bustle of this world? What is the end of avarice and ambition, of the pursuit of wealth, power, and preeminence? And I chose this quote because when I was in a school in India, studying in a Roman Catholic school as a Muslim, and I read a poem written by Thomas Gray, an elegy written in a country churchyard. And in that he says, the path of greatness and glory lead but to the grave. At the end of our lives, none of us will take anything with us. We are merely trustees and custodians. And as trustees and custodians, we have been given a very big responsibility. We are the vice regents of this world. Whether it is the environment, whether it is the climate, whether it is healthcare, we have big responsibilities. So I chose this because this is the ultimate reality of life. And the purpose of an economy is to build a fairer, a just, and a better world for all.
And how does that affect the way you invest?
Well, we are an ethical firm. We run on the Islamic principle, which is called Sharia. And if one sentence can describe it, we invest in that which is good for mankind. In the Quran, there is a word called Yanfaun Nas. We invest in that which is good for mankind.
How do you know what will be good for mankind? There's a question, isn't it? And that you invest indeed in something, you can't tell the results of investing in that. And you could look at an investment that you think, well, I don't like the look of that much, and be entirely wrong. And it turned out to be absolutely fantastic for mankind. AI is a classic of that, right? Bit dodgy, but might turn out to be rather good.
There is a lot of consensus across the world, fortunately. ESG investments, impact investments, whatever you want to call it. And you know what to avoid. You don't invest into the defense sector. You don't invest into environmentally destructive companies. And when you invest, you ask yourself, and we have this philosophy of better ownership. If I own anything, how will I be a better owner? And can I be a better owner? And during our investment, we ask ourselves, are we being a better owner? And you are tested for that. We have a business here, which is food business. And any one of you who like food, Zaatar wa Zayt, please go and buy double of Zaatar Zayt today, Cinnamon, Five Guys, and all those businesses. We were about to sell this business, and COVID came. we had 1,486 employees. And the buyer, we told him this is what's on the card. The businesses, food businesses are going to suffer. He said, don't worry, I will fire half of the workforce. We didn't sell the business. We created instead a welfare fund, not from the company's resources, but from the employees. We put our money and we said, we will not let you down. We will not abandon you. It was a terrible time. So you invest into business in a way that you have a responsibility as a steward.
But that will come as payback, right? And that those employees will now be very loyal to the business.
They are indeed. And if you go to Zaatar and Zayt, you will get very good service and good food.
Now, I just wanted to just ask you briefly, all the businesses that you invest in are private, right? You're not investing in listed businesses.
Yes, we invest into private businesses. We invest into good to better businesses, in education, in healthcare. We've just invested $1 billion in a healthcare company in the region. And these are big opportunities to create an impact. And when we invest into healthcare, we make sure that we have a proposition for the people who can only afford in the affordable segment of healthcare. But we also have mid-market and the premium segment. Because you need to make sure that you can use technology to have an offering on the people who cannot afford the expensive hospitals.
And to equalize. Yeah. Okay, right. Have we got questions? There one at the back here.
So I have two questions. One is to Ashleen M, and the other is just for anyone who would take up the question. So my first question is about investing, and what advice would you have for young people the young adults that want to venture into investing? What advice do you have for us? And the other one is more of a personal question. So since I aspire to become a business mogul, what skills should I learn between negotiating or pitching? Which one do you think would just shoot me out there? Thank you.
Isn't the tripod on the beach with the influencer kind of...
Yeah, just get a tripod. You're all good.
I paid for that question.
Oh.
Why don't you take the second one first?
I'll take the second one. I definitely think pitching is overrated. I think no one people try to put their best foot forward, but if you really care about something, you become very nervous. So I think sometimes it just takes someone getting to know you. So I've always found that negotiation is always where I am strongest. It's my strong suit. It also gives me time to calm down because I get very excited about stuff and I don't like to lose. And so I always just say the negotiation is easier than the pitch.
Okay. Iqbal, pitch or negotiation?
I think I would say that you should follow your heart, follow your passion. If work for your passion, that will create your pension. You know, it's very, very important to do that. Money is a problem for mediocrity, in whether it's a corporate entity or a country or an individual. Money is never, ever a problem for excellence. So excel in whatever you do.
Okay, I need to contradict you here. I'm really sorry. Don't like to do this with the panelists, but do not follow your passions. Do not follow your passions. It's almost certain that you will not be good at the thing you're passionate about or not good enough, right? So I always say to people, don't follow your passion. Get a good job that does something useful, make some money, and play your guitar in your spare time.
I'm here to tell you that's exactly what happened. I was a classical violinist. I thought I was going to be a full-time violinist and played in a couple of symphonies. To Merryn's point, I was not good enough, and I needed to eat. So my dad told me to go into insurance, and the rest is history.
Unless your passion is accountancy, you know? Well, why didn't you do it, investing? What advice do you have for the young starting out?
Firstly, invest in what you know, and invest in where you know, and invest with whom you know. Avoid the funds or investments where there is a lot of fee built into it. So when you are young, you should build an index fund, which is low fees, because fees eats up about 20 to 25% of your potential profitability. And you can't time the market. Just every month, set aside. But the biggest investment which you can make is in yourself. Invest in yourself, believe in yourself, and excel in it. And with due apologies to the chair, follow your heart, follow your passion.
All right, I tell you what, apart from that very last sentence, that was some of the best investing advice I've ever heard. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Right, let's take another question on the corridor here, not corridor, aisle.
Hi, my question to Ashley. You mentioned deregulation, how it's helped economy, at times, and you touch based on that. My question is that the last time there was a deregulation in US, we saw a big recession, financial deregulation. And I see now that, there is a lot of deregulation happening in the big techs, like, the net neutrality, or I think today just some policy update. What's your point on that?
So, yes, okay, I can see that there could potentially be an issue depending on how far the deregulation goes, right? So you can curb inflation with how far you decide to go with deregulation. If you're just going to let the floodgates open and let the SEC just close a blind eye to everything, yes, I could see that being a problem. I think more nearly what Trump, and a fool's theory is to try to guess what he's thinking, right? But what I think he would like is to make it a little bit easier. I think our past administration had so many roadblocks, and it made it so difficult to get a deal done private equity decided to just stop looking at deals, to just stop thinking about M&A altogether. And I do think that slows down an economy, right? That people lose steam, they lose hope, they get bored. I think in this instance, it is picking up steam. You are seeing more private equity deals. You are seeing people talk about it. Davos, for all of its talk about, DEI, it was talk about the fact that basically, yes, M&A, it's looking more promising. Private equity is looking to deploy more capital. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, that's good for us, right? We like when we're able to acquire things. I'm sure you've noticed.
Our world has become a bottom line society. We measure every relationship about how much money can we make. And it's led by America. America has a Statue of Liberty, which means free markets, which is what Adam Smith wanted. But if Adam Smith had his way, he would have created a Statue of Responsibility in America. And I think that deregulation, unfettered control, will be disastrous for America. Quantitative easing is very inflationary. The fact that banks have control over financial intermediation and the payment system, it is the only industry in which you can, in good times, privatize the profits, in bad times, socialize the losses, because the banks control the payment systems. The other thing which is very important is that the difference between corporate banking, commercial banking, and investment banking. Way back, we would remember in history, there were two senators called Senator Glass and Senator Steagall. They had a Glass-Steagall Act to make sure America does not have any Great Depression. Markets go in cycles. I think we are at the high point of the cycles. And every country has a responsibility to the people who are not well off. How many people are going to be hurt by this deregulation, by this bottom line society which we are creating?
If I might just add on Adam Smith, the group of people he was most concerned with, if you across his texts, was the poor. Those were the people that he was most concerned with, and he wanted to unleash their creativity. And so I think we can always look back to Smith and not assume he's this rabid free marketeer. It was always, again, this idea of responsibility and allowing for everyone to flourish.
Which is why you picked your quote from Moral Sentiments, right?
Indeed. And Adam, you know that the world, as I said earlier, we are becoming a majority-minority nation. The world is decivilizing. Today you walk in the UK, you could be stabbed with a knife for no reason. In America, a bullet can hit you. All of Africa is decivilizing, what happened to Sudan and many countries. But I think we should always remember that when we classify human beings as them and us, in the final analysis, there is no them. It's all us. We could be in that position where we could be an immigrant and we could be looking for a job. So our responsibility toward those who are less fortunate is a sacred responsibility.
Very Smithian.
And those who take care of it are going to be blessed in every possible way.
I want to take you back to something you said earlier about markets going in cycles and thus being at the peak of the market cycle. Is that something that you would follow across to stock markets? So we talked about the US market briefly earlier, and we talked about how one should invest when one's young. If you're young and you're starting investing, should you be avoiding the American stock market?
No, not necessarily. There is always in the stock market companies which create value. So you must invest with your heart as well and mind. Your heart is that I want to invest in a company which does good, a company which is run by good people, by honest people, a company which is fair. See, competence and excellence are interlinked, and integrity and competence are also interlinked.
Okay, I just have one final thought. The equities in the U.S. are valued pretty high right now, right? I think any great portfolio manager or any prudent individual, especially if you are investing when you're young, it's costing too much to buy into the U.S. stock market. You could potentially offset that cost by probably investing in the UK stock market, to say, right? Because the US stock market, the UK stock market, I mean, there aren't very many there, but there is something. You can find something there.
There's quite a lot left. Quite a lot.
Yes, there's something there. So I always just think that good portfolio management is, yes, it is going to be very difficult to buy into the U.S. stock market right now, especially if you're young, especially if funds are not just limitless. And good portfolio management would be to look at the UK stock market, to look at some of the other larger stock markets, Sweden, wherever, to just if you want to just get your foot in the door. Obviously, I'd probably start with the UK after the US.
What about the regional stock markets here?
Yes, I like the stock market, the regional stock market here, and there are obviously some very large brands that are currently listed, and they're trading very well, and they're also getting look-see from global markets. This is also a very good place to invest, obviously.
In the meanwhile, do invest into gold as a hedge against inflation.
Yes, I love gold.
I love gold too.
I love gold.
I love gold. Do you love gold, Adam?
Keeps the price
down.
Absolutely.
Yes, so as we discussed today, the inflation problems and that a lot of countries haven't recovered after the COVID and the recession makes university students, all of us, question how we should stand out. What should you do to make you feel like yourself stand out, especially with all these projections with recessions and stuff. But yeah, I would love to hear from you and in the region and overall in the UK and US. It's very important, I feel for all of us here. So yeah.
So I went to uni in the US for graduate school, and the reason why I actually did get a job is because I left the US. So I think you all are in a very unique position, and in a position, quite honestly, where you are much more marketable because you have an international background. You are not sitting. I mean, I went to Texas A&M. It's a fine school. Created some geniuses. But after that, I took a job that moved me to Manana. And because I was one of the few people that was willing to move and to go somewhere else, I think the problem is if you benchmark your success against a U.S. graduate, it doesn't make any sense because a U.S. graduate wants to stay in the U.S. That job market is small. If you are an international MBA student and you are fine with moving to Singapore, you are going to fare much better, right? Because you are interested in moving around. And quite honestly, you're doing the opposite of what the U.S. is trying to do anyway. You're becoming more global.
The most important attribute you can have as a young graduate is to believe in yourself. Emotional resilience. Remember that
I thought you were going to say passion again, but...
No, not passion. Emotional resilience. And you remember that you will face rejection after rejection. Every no always leads to a better yes. And you got to believe that there is an opportunity which is tailor-made for you. It is waiting for you, if only you would believe.
I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I think but it's important because I think it's this journey where especially as an academic, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's how long you can persist. But it's about finding opportunities and trying new things and being willing to take risks, moving to different countries. And I think that's the more enjoyable. It's enjoy the process rather than, oh, how much am I making? Because good opportunities will come.
My question today is to Mr. Khan. So many ESG funds focus on environmental factors, wherein it is very difficult to quantify the social impacts that actually has. So how could investors like you or anyone who is actually investing into mankind ensure their money is truly driving a positive social change in this world?
Okay, what are the parameters for certainty?
So the one-line answer, as directed by the chairperson, we don't have a democracy here, is that look at the rankings of the ESG fund. It is published, it is rated, and go for the top upper quartile. And you will be well served.
I have views here, but I'm going to leave those to one side for now. Other questions? We have another one on the aisle here.
Thank you. So we are in the UAE. We're the epicenter. We can see that our butcher, our brewer, and our baker are fighting out there. What are the opportunities that the UAE has today in the next 4 or 5 years of this whole geopolitical landscape in terms of growing this economy?
Okay, good question. I'll tell you what, we're gonna make that a shorter question and say, I'm a graduate today. Which sector am I going to look for work in if I'm staying in the UAE?
Insurance, finance.
Tourism. In Dubai, if you are working and you get into tourism sector, because that's growing very fast. But the government depends on your specialization as well. So that's my answer to you.
Tourism, insurance. Last question.
My question is about real estate investment. And as you could see, regionally there is a real estate boom, especially in Dubai. And what is your take on the real estate investment locally and globally, looking at the historical cycles of ups and downs?
So real estate is at the moment in the region and in the world, but especially in the region, very high. So it's closer to the highs and closer to a correction than at the bottom. But both bottom picking or the calling the top is a very risky business. Maybe it will grow up by another 15, 20, 30%, but it has already grown up so much that you have to be careful. And in the real estate, it's about location, which everybody used to call, but it's about specification and how you structure your investments. That become very important.
I was hoping you were going to say that if you were going to buy a house of some kind in a toppy market like this, you should buy one you have a passion for.
You don't like the word passion, do you? You have a problem with that.
I just worry that we give people, that people expect to be able to follow their passion and make a career out of it. And so often that's such a failure. I want people to try and be practical. That's all.
But if you are a married man, let your wife choose the house. And you will have a blissful life.
All right, we're gonna have to end it there. Thank you, Iqbal. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much for coming today. Wait, I haven't finished with the thank yous. And thank you so much to Heriot-Watt for hosting us today. It's been absolutely wonderful. And Heather, thank you so much to you for facilitating all of this. Now we can clap. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Money. If you like our show, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep sending questions or comments to merrynmoney@bloomberg.net. You can also follow me and John on Twitter or X. I'm at MerrynSW, and John is John_Stepek. This episode was hosted by me, Merryn Somerset Webb. The show is produced by Summer Sadi and Moses Andam. Sound designed by Blake Maples. Special thanks to the team at Heriot-Watt and, of course, to all our guests, Adam Dixon, Ashley Hunter, and Iqbal Kham.